Good morning. So I have been teasing you for several weeks about how I could be in two places at once. And because we have technology and because I have the good help of Ken Bussell, our office manager, and I know that you should probably give a round of applause for Roland French because he's going to be in the sound booth. So take a minute to thank Roland and Ken because this wouldn't happen without their help. You'll probably be wondering why it is that I have a collar on, because I usually don't wear a collar. But it's really important for a public witness like the Pride Parade, which is where I am right now. It's important that I be recognized as clergy, because that's part of the powerful message from our faith tradition and from our community of faith, that yes, even our clergy are open and affirming and want to welcome people regardless of their sexual orientation, their gender identity, or gender expression. So that's why I have this public symbol on, because symbols are important. I'm in our garden. I'm not far from our peace pole. It's Wednesday, and I know that you are thrilled to see me and know that I'm representing you in Portland. So last week I ended my sermon with a lovely picture of the Oregon coast with a rainbow coming across. It looked like it could have been Cannon Beach. And I asked, do you know what the symbol of the rainbow is in the Christian tradition? And many of you said yes, it comes from the 9th chapter of Genesis, which Lynn just read for you, and it is the story of Noah's Ark. More importantly, it's the story of God making a covenant with Noah and then bringing a flood. And at the end of the story, you know that God said through Noah, or to Noah, you know what, I am not going to do destruction again. Yes, I was disappointed in your keeping of the covenant, but destruction is not a good way to keep people faithful. I will never do this again. And so there will be a sign. It will be a bow in the sky. It will be a rainbow. And so the rainbow has become the universal sign for the Lgbtq community, or the gay community. And it's very important that we can continue to have these signs and symbols as a part of our identity as an open and affirming church in the United Church of Christ. So this has become the universal symbol. And so the universal symbol connects with my sermon title, which is Why Pride and What's PFLAG? Take a page out of David Letterman and get rid of that particular slide. So the importance of why Pride and why PFLAG really has three sources. The first source is my own personal conviction. My own personal conviction as a Christian. I have always been focused on social justice issues. They've always been critical and at the heart of who I am as a Christian and as an ordained leader in the United Church of Christ. I, like many of you, though, grew up in a time when most gay, lesbian, transgendered, bisexual folks were closeted. And we didn't have a lot of experience because it was kept quiet. And I have been fortunate in my life. I went to Union Seminary in New York City, and I had come from Maine, and I was sort of a blueberry seed that got dropped in this huge urban melting pot of cultural and human experience. And one of the things that happened to me while I was there, I had been a fairly privileged, straight, white guy with not a lot of experience with gay and lesbian folks. And I remember this is what happened. I was sitting my second year of seminary, having a beer with a guy who I will call Will. Will was a wonderful guy. I had him in several of my classes, and I said, you know, Will, I gotta tell you, I am just really struggling with this, the gay caucus here. It just feels like this gay agenda is being shoved down my throat, and I just don't get it. And he sat and he listened, shook his head, and then he looked at me and he said, David, I'm gay. And if you'd had a feather, you probably could have knocked me over, because Will was not at all what I thought of the stereotype of a gay man. So I felt very embarrassed, and he said, don't be embarrassed, David. He said, let me ask you a few questions. first of all, I said, do you consider me to be a fairly intelligent person? To which I easily said, sure. Do you take me as a fairly gifted person and a person who would be a good minister? Yes, absolutely. He said, do you think that I'm fairly sane? And I said, yeah, I really like you. I think you're pretty sane. You're one of my favorite people here. And he said, so why, if I am intelligent, healthy, gifted, would I choose a gay lifestyle? Then he said, tell me why it is that you are attracted to Jeannie. At that point, we were just dating. He said, explain to me how it is that you choose that. How is it that that's your lifestyle choice? And I said, well, it doesn't feel like a lifestyle choice. It feels like this is what I'm wired for. And he said, exactly. I have known the same thing since I was a young boy, that I was attracted to other boys in the same way that you were attracted to girls. So it's not like I'm choosing this. And he said, the other thing I've noticed when you study in the library, you've got a picture of Jeannie nearby. At work, I can't have a picture of Barry, who is my lover and my best friend and my partner. I would lose my job if I had a picture of Barry on my desk. So because I had that experience, because I had that relationship, it opened the door and it cracked some of the stereotypes I had. So I went on to serve a church, as you know, in Boulder, Colorado. That was an open and affirming church in 1987. They had lived into their identity. I got a chance to meet and have lots of members of the church that I served who loved me into the awareness of the power of being an ally. An ally is someone who is a heterosexual or straight person who really understands and empathizes with what it would be like if you were gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or queer. So those relationships, I have been loved into this kind of openness. So it's my own personal conviction, my own experiences, and our identity as an open and affirming congregation. Open and affirming is the United Church of Christ language for a church welcoming anybody regardless of gender orientation, sexual orientation, or gender expression. Open and affirming is a process that churches go through, and many of you might have forgotten that in 2000 rather, 3 years before I arrived, the church went through a very intentional study process. Small groups, Bible studies, guests from other churches. It was a long, intensive, very intentional decision-making process. And this church decided to be an open and affirming congregation. But like any identity, we have to grow into an identity. Think about when you were a teenager and you were trying to figure out who you are. It takes a while to grow into an identity, and that's what our church is an open and affirming church has been doing, which brings me to the third reason why pride is important, and pride is important particularly today. As you know, we have been hosting the Washington County launch of PFLAG. And this has been probably an over a 2-year effort. And so I want to talk a little bit about PFLAG. Some of you may not even know what PFLAG stands for, and so I want to orient you to that. And with the help of Ken, I will continue to do that. So I want to start with the letters, PFLAG, and here's what the individual letters mean. First is parents, P, families, of lesbians, and this is the fun part, gays. I hope somebody walking by is enjoying some of this technical stuff. And so that's what PFLAG means. Parents, families of lesbian and gays. And so here's the mission statement of the Portland chapter. Actually, if you would hold that for me, Ken. There's a vision statement and a mission statement. And so the PFLAG Portland vision statement is PFLAG envisions a world where diversity is celebrated and all people are respected, valued, and affirmed inclusive of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. That's the vision. And here's the mission statement. Through our core values of meeting people where they are and collaborating with others, PFLAG seeks to realize our vision through three things: support for families, allies, and people who are LGBTQ, education for ourselves and others about the unique issues and challenges that people who are LGBTQ face, and advocacy in our communities to change attitudes and create policies and laws that achieve full equality for people who are LGBTQ. PFLAG provides opportunity for dialogue about sexual orientation and gender identity and acts to create a society that is healthy and respectful of human diversity. So that's the mission of PFLAG. And you might, I know lots of folks have said, well, yes, we're hosting the PFLAG, and we're just wondering, how can we be supportive? What are the meetings like? And how can we be connected? So, quick orientation. We meet publicly for the meetings on the third Thursday evening at 7 o'clock in the fellowship hall. Anybody can come to a PFLAG meeting. You don't have to have a family member who is lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgendered. You don't have to have a connection. It's just important, if you want to be an ally, to come and be part and listen. All you have to do is, there are two parts of the meeting. There's an educational piece, and then there's a support circle. And if you want to sit in the support circle and hear some of the stories, that would be totally awesome, because actually the LGBTQ community needs people who are allies to help them. So this would be a very important thing for you to do. I want to say a little bit about LGBTQ, because sometimes it's language and letters that could be confusing. So here we're going to do another letter assessment. So LGBTQ, and the first two would probably be, you would know, lesbian is the L. I'm sorry, gay is the G. L is lesbian. Here's the G. Bisexual. Transgender. And the Q stands for queer or questioning. I want to just say, so this is the community that PFLAG seeks to serve. It's the community that open and affirming congregations seek to serve. It's not the only community, but if you have been persecuted and excluded, if you've been considered some kind of a deviant, which is, I want to focus for a minute on the letter Q, queer or questioning. When I was a kid, if somebody was called queer, it was a very pejorative term. There is a movement among the community to actually reclaim the power of queer or questioning. And I want to emphasize that when you hear these kinds of stories, and that there are people who are struggling with this, you might think to yourself, boy, this is so foreign to me. I don't have any idea how I could be supportive. You can be supportive simply by listening and being present and being a student of what this means, because here I am, pastor of this church, helping with the launch of a PFLAG, and I'm still learning. There are stuff, gender identity and gender expression and gender fluidity are all things that are fairly new to me, but I'm willing to step out there because I know that people have been closeted in past generations, and they haven't been able to be themselves. So there's really something dangerous about deviant and queer, and why it is that we have to be advocates for the LGBTQ community. Orlando happened last week. It was an awful, ugly, devastating attack. What made it particularly devastating is that it was intentionally targeted to the gay, lesbian, transgendered, bisexual, queer community and the Latino community. Sometimes we can believe that, you know, we're just more modern, we've been in favor of marriage equality, these problems are going to kind of go away, and yet this was a targeted hate act. And so we have to remember and stand up and stand with people. Here's what I learned from some of my clergy colleagues who are gay and lesbian this past week as I had interaction with them. One of the things that we as straight people could lose sight of is that when we think of the bar scene, we think of connecting with people, you know, hooking up with somebody or maybe finding a date or a partner or something like that. That is true for the LGBTQ community, but it has actually, the gay bar scene was a sanctuary. It was one of the places where people could be themselves. They could celebrate themselves. In fact, they would even have memorial services at gay bars because that was one of the few places where they knew that they would be welcomed and no one would judge them. No one would consider, oh, if my partner were gay and he died, we can't have that service in the church. So this was like hitting the nerve center of the LGBTQ community. Last thing I want to say is that there is something very powerful about reclaiming this sort of deviant the word deviant, because that's basically a sociological term that means you fall outside of the norm. Well, I don't know about you, but being normal can be pretty boring, and I'm not necessarily interested in being normal, nor do I think Jesus was really interested in being normal. In fact, lots of what he did with his ministry was completely deviant. He did exactly the opposite of what the culture said he should be doing. So this, for us, is a step into our Christian faith. It's living it even though we might not completely understand it. Think in your life about the people who have been, you might call them deviant, maybe just because they're different. They have been some of the most important, creative people. I remember the phrase, well-behaved women fairly make history. And that's pretty true of any human being who has tried to make a mark. They don't necessarily fit in and march to the beat of the drum of the culture. So on this particular Pride Day, I am delighted to be representing you, all the UCC churches who are open and affirming, and to encourage us to be a public witness for this community. Peace be with you, and let the people say, Amen.